All right, let's just jump right into it. If you're an educator, a parent, or really anyone who spends time guiding kids, you absolutely know this feeling. You spend your whole weekend reading these incredible educational theories, you get totally fired up by all these high-minded ideals, and then, well, Sunday night rolls around, you get that universal anxiety creeping in as you face the very real boots-on-the-ground reality of a brand new week. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into a brilliant 1970 handbook that was written specifically to bridge that massive gap between big-picture philosophy and everyday practice. Now, this right here is the exact problem the late educational philosopher John Holt was trying to tackle. See, by the late 1960s, Holt was already pretty famous for his critiques of traditional schooling. People really loved his ideas. The philosophy spread like wildfire. But he kept getting letters from people essentially saying, "John, we completely agree with you, but what do we actually do when the kids walk through the door on Monday morning?" Holt realized pretty quickly that just critiquing the system wasn't going to cut it. People needed actual, actionable steps. So, to see how he answered that, here is our agenda for this explainer. We'll start with the Monday morning question, move into learning is natural growth, redefine the teacher's role, and see how real life is the curriculum. Then we'll hit some practical applications you can use tomorrow and wrap up with Holt's lasting legacy.
Okay, Section 1, the Monday morning question. Let's move from theory straight into reality.
What's super interesting when you read the foreword of this book is how it frames the text. It doesn't call itself a rigid step-by-step curriculum. Instead, it uses this great phrase, a rich harvest of possibilities. Holt wasn't trying to just hand teachers a script to blindly read from. That defeats the whole purpose. He wanted to offer this hopeful collection of ideas to empower you to build environments where children just naturally want to learn. Really, it's an open invitation for us to experiment.
Moving right along to Section 2, Learning as Natural Growth. It's time to rethink what learning actually means.
Think about the traditional school model for a second. We tend to look at learning as this really mechanical transfer of data, right? Like the teacher holds all the knowledge and they just pour it into the student, almost like you're filling up an empty container. But Holt's model flips that completely on its head. He views learning as this natural, organic growth process. It isn't a one-way street at all. It's a super dynamic two-way interaction between the child and the real world. Kids are actively constructing their own knowledge by connecting with nature, with numbers, language, and their community. And because he looks at learning organically, Holt drastically reframes how we should handle errors. In a traditional setting, mistakes are, well, they're treated as failures, right? And that breeds a lot of fear. But Holt argues, and this is absolutely crucial, that mistakes are actually solid proof that genuine learning is happening. They're a necessary part of how we refine our understanding. When you take away the fear of messing up, you'd be amazed at how it just unleashes a child's natural built-in drive to figure things out.
Which brings us to Section 3, the teacher's new role. Time to swap out some of those old hots.
If kids are naturally curious, then our job description has to fundamentally change. Instead of being the one talking at the front of the room or the strict enforcer of rules, you put on a whole new set of hats. You become an observer. You literally just watch to see what lights a child up. You're a guide, a provider of resources. But honestly, the coolest part is that you become a fellow learner. Holt reminds us that it's completely okay to not have all the answers. In fact, it's incredibly powerful to look at a student and just say, "You know what? I have no idea. Let's find out together."
Let's dive into Section 4. Real life is curriculum. We are throwing out the idea of isolated subjects.
Instead of slicing the day into these disconnected artificial blocks, like, okay, math is at 9 a.m., science is at 10 a.m., Holt points out how a single real-world investigation connects everything. It's like a giant puzzle coming together. If you go outside and study a tree in your neighborhood, you're doing science through biology. You're doing math by trying to measure its height. You're practicing writing by describing it. History by looking at how the land around it changed, and art by sketching the leaves. The whole world just becomes the richest curriculum you could ever ask for.
All right, Section 5, Practical Classroom Applications. This is the big one, what we're actually doing when the bell rings on Monday.
First up, language arts. Holt quotes Wendell Johnson here with this brilliant little phrase, "You can't write writing." What he means is, Holt is totally against those endless, disconnected grammar worksheets. Writing shouldn't be taught as this isolated, mechanical skill that kids might supposedly need someday. It has to be a genuine communication of what they feel and believe right now. You have to write about something you actually care about.
To make that happen, Holt was a massive advocate for free writing. The whole goal is just getting thoughts onto paper, zero fear of the red pen judging your spelling. Take a listen to this actual excerpt from a child's free writing exercise. Meow you goes the cat, meow you goes the funny cat,
oh no, here comes a baby. I mean, it's playful, it's real. By dropping that obsession with perfect punctuation right out of the gate, you invite this joyful, fearless kind of expression. You can always polish the grammar later when it actually makes sense in context.
So, language is all about fearless expression. But what about math? Well, Holt doesn't reject math, he rejects meaningless rote arithmetic. To make math real, you start with tangible things. Give them stopwatches, give them tape measures, not just abstract worksheets. And here's a fantastic tip from Holt. When you see a kid trying to solve a problem the long, roundabout way, you have to resist the urge to jump in and say, hey, here's an easier way. Let them struggle a bit. By figuring it out themselves, they are discovering the actual language of mathematics.
Here's another super practical Monday morning idea: collecting. Having kids collect everyday stuff, rocks, seeds, newspaper clippings, or even just weird words they hear. It sounds like simple play, right? But it naturally sneaks in some seriously high-level academic skills. Because when you collect things, you inevitably start to classify them. You compare them. You keep statistics. They're doing complex analytical work, but to them, it just feels like a really fascinating hobby.
Finally, Section 6, John Holt's Enduring Legacy. Let's look at why ideas from 50 years ago still matter so much today.
They matter immensely because the core struggle hasn't changed. This thought from the foreword perfectly captures Holt's message to anyone feeling boxed in by the educational system. He totally gets that we are all walled in by rules and circumstances. But he insists, we actually have way more freedom than we think. We just have to push against those walls to see where they really are. As the quote says, the way to begin is to begin.
And when you really look at his practical advice, you realize Holt was laying the groundwork for things we talk about all the time today. Way before project-based learning or inquiry-based learning were these popular, trendy buzzwords, Holt was drawing up the exact blueprints for how to pull them off on a random Monday morning. He proved that even tiny, practical shifts in how we approach the day can completely transform a student's engagement. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final kind of provocative thought. The biggest takeaway from John Holt isn't just handing a kid a stopwatch or doing a free writing prompt. It's a whole mindset shift. Next time you wake up on a Monday morning, ask yourself this: what experience can I create today that will spark that natural curiosity? How can I help this child genuinely connect with the world around them? If we start right there, the learning, well, it just naturally follows.